Okay, hey everybody. I'm the Food Institute Senior Content Manager, Chris Campbell, and welcome to our webinar, Training the Next Generation of Food Industry Managers. Food Institute is the best single source for food industry news, data, and trends. And to learn more about the Food Institute, check us out at foodinstitute.com and sign up for our free newsletters to stay up to date on all our great content. To start, I'd like to thank Proaction International for sponsoring this webinar. Proaction builds on the human element, equipped with the right technology, as a driving force behind the performance and competitiveness of organizations. Deployed on 3 continents, their approach focuses on developing management maturity across organizations and achieving gains at human, operational, and financial levels. Proaction International's experts provide support based on coaching and tracking of teams, organization and tools and processes, and digitalization of management via the UTrack DMS application, which fosters good management behavior. And you can learn more at proactioninternational.com/en/industries/agri-food. We'll also send a quick thank you to Nellson Neutraceuticals for participating in today's event as well. I'd also like to take care of a little housekeeping. A recording of this webinar will be shared with all registrants and attendees. Please allow a few days for processing and keep an eye on your inbox for that email. And time permitting, we'll be hosting a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A tab on the side of your screen. I really want to stress this. You're going to have an opportunity to talk with 2 experts here to get some ideas about some of the food industry management tools and tips that you would like to use. And finally, as you probably see right now, there is a poll question that should have popped up on your screen. We ask you to please provide your answers so that this webinar can be as interactive as possible. Now I'd like to introduce today's guests. Jacob Rivers is Vice President of Operations for North America at Proaction International and has worked with organizations to improve their operations over 10 years. Process optimization specialist by training, he soon realized the importance of frontline leaders to bottom line success. Since then, he has focused on their performance and the structures they interact with. He believes that frontline leaders have the most challenging role in an organization, and they also hold the potential of having the greatest impact. We also welcome Craig Young, who serves as Senior Director of Operations at Nellson Neutraceutical for the last 3 years, starting up their new modernized plant in Ontario, California. He brings 25 years of operations and leadership experience to the Nellson team, and previously Craig was Director of Operational Excellence in Six Sigma at International Vitamin Corporation, where he led a turnaround and eventual sale of the powder operations. Craig has also held multiple roles in beverage manufacturing at Niagara Bottling, including Director of Supply Chain and Vice President of Manufacturing, overseeing strategic planning, 7 bottling plants, a greenfield expansion, and 2 turnarounds. And now, with that all out of the way, I'll hand it over to Jacob to get today's presentation started. So over to you, Jacob.
Great. Thanks a lot, Chris. I appreciate the intro. And thank you to everybody for joining us. We are here today to talk about the role our leaders play today in the success of our organizations tomorrow. So as Chris mentioned, I'm pleased to be joined by Craig Young from Nellson. The reason we have Craig on here is he has demonstrated very successfully how much of an impact his frontline leaders play in the success of his organization when provided with the right tools and framework to deliver success. It's somewhat of a specific topic to focus on, the frontline leaders, when discussing performance improvement. So let's start with the why. Why do we do it? Why do we make this investment of time, energy, and money? I see some of the polls already starting to roll in terms of where the bulk of those investments go. As with any investment of time, energy, or money, placing our focus in the right place will determine how successful we are in executing our future strategies. So with the short amount of polling we have in, I did expect to see something along the lines of capital being our front runner. And I think it goes in line with what we see historically. So when we look at the typical balance of how our time, energy, or money is invested in our organization, it often looks something like this. So one of the reasons we chose this approach and this topic today for Craig and I was to challenge this distribution of investments to see if we could balance the pie to a certain extent. It wasn't only for that reason, but we'll get back to that reason. Craig had a few of his own reasons and a few of his own objectives he wanted to accomplish. So I'll let Craig weigh in on the non-investment related portion.
Well, thank you for that excellent introduction, and just want to say pleased to be here and looking forward to a great interactive discussion today. Jake and I really designed this to be educational, but also interactive, get the juices flowing, and we want to help you on your potential journey with process improvement and engaging the leaders of tomorrow, especially frontline leadership. Really, with Nellson being a relatively new plant startup, after having a much different culture at a previous plant, we saw the need to develop our frontline leaders. Oftentimes, frontline leaders are promoted because they're the best operator or they're maxed out on their salary. And to keep them engaged and aligned in a facility, you make them a lead, you make them a supervisor. I'm sure we've all done it, but that's not necessarily giving them the right tools to be successful. So we saw a lot of highly motivated, talented people that did not have the correct tools, did not know how to be a frontline supervisor. And, based upon some of our company history with Proaction, really decided to engage them to teach, develop, train, and put their specialized model into place in order to show them really the nuts and bolts of how to be a great leader, how to run a line, how to have active supervision. And realistically, our main goal, which we'll talk about during the presentation, was to increase throughput. We recognized that we had this great capital expenditure, like you can see on the slide here. We spent millions and millions of dollars on a state-of-the-art facility, but we weren't reaching the full potential. And we'll talk a little bit how we identified and knew what that full potential was, how we selected our KPIs, and how we progressed through our project. So that's a little bit of the why behind why Nellson engaged in this very critical project.
And if you're out there listening to Craig resonating with his story, or looking at this pie chart and going, oh my gosh, I'm doing that same thing, it's okay. Investing in this way is completely normal. It brings your facility to have great capacity, great capability, overall increased potential, as Craig mentioned. The challenge becomes at a certain point, it's not so much the level of capacity or potential, but your team's ability to achieve this potential with consistency on a day in, day out basis. This is where our frontline leaders' performance comes into play. So on any given day, as we all know, life happens. And for one reason or another, variances in our operation prevent us from hitting our objectives that the facility was designed and engineered to hit. Our team's ability to navigate, foresee, and overcome these challenges in real time will often be the difference between maximizing the potential of our investments already made or falling short and leaving some on the table. How our frontline leaders operate on a daily basis and the aspects of their day-to-day and the business that they manage have a great impact on our ability to achieve these objectives. So the question for Craig and I, when we initially spoke back in March of 2021, Craig, yeah, time flies, was to look at frontline leaders day to day and optimize it to the point where they were in full control of the daily result. So we had to ask ourselves that first burning critical question: how do we put them in a position to succeed? For us, it boiled down to two key questions. How do they allocate their time throughout the day in alignment with that objective? And what do they manage during that time? So sounds like a pretty simple, straightforward question to ask. Let's first take a look at the analysis of how that time's spent. So back in March 2021, we conducted an analysis with Craig's plant. And during our initial analysis of the situation, we categorized each minute of the frontline leader's day into the 5 main categories you're seeing here. So we had active supervision, passive supervision, manual work, administrative, and training of their staff. The results you can see on the left-hand column where you see the start with the Nellson logo. So we were seeing 7% of their time spent in active supervision versus 39% spent in passive supervision. Only 1% spent on training and coaching of their team, 11% in manual work, and a whopping 42% in administration. Craig, what were some of your key takeaways back in March 2021 when we looked at this?
Well, as the folks on the call can probably imagine, we were a bit surprised. We knew we had an opportunity, obviously, or we wouldn't have engaged in the process, but we didn't know kind of how bad it was. When I saw the analysis of 16,500 companies that Proaction had identified, I said, "Oh, we're going to do better than that," and certainly we were. We were pretty much right at the average. I think where we were surprised with how much administrative work our so-called frontline leaders were performing, because it didn't match up what we said our goals were and what we were telling the people was important to them. We want you to be on the line. We want you to manage. You can say those things, but what does that mean to a leader who has maybe never done it before or was an operator, like I said? And then, unmanaged quality has demands on leads. Sanitation has demands on leads. We ask them to write reports. We don't necessarily optimize those reports. We do double work. So nearly 50% of their time was done in administrative tasks. So that was a big aha moment, as we say, in terms of we knew that they weren't necessarily supervising the correct way. So we weren't totally surprised by the passive supervision, but the amount of non-value added activities we were asking them to do was quite eye-opening.
So we knew at this point, bottom line, some changes had to be made in order to even facilitate or start to facilitate the change process. Our initial step was to set some targets. So knowing what each of these categories represented, we set out with an objective to maximize the frontline leaders' active supervision component of their day. After all, as Craig just said, this is the most value-added component of what's involved in a frontline leader's role and responsibility.
It might be good to clarify a little bit, Jake, too, just the key differences between active and passive supervision.
It's a great point, Craig. And so let's take a bit of time and just differentiate between those two. I guess we'll start with passive supervision because it's probably the most prevalent out there. It's something we've all seen or come into contact with. It's our supervisors or team leads or frontline leaders that are in firefighting mode. Almost all of their day or almost half of their day is consumed with dealing with issues that are coming up, reacting to the situation that they've been given. And oftentimes they're very good at that. They're very skilled at that. As Craig mentioned, many of these individuals were promoted from the floor. They have a very strong technical knowledge about the areas of the facility that they're responsible for. But what we tried to do is shift that passive supervision, that reactive firefighting mode into active supervision, where we're preventatively checking on things. We're in a proactive mode and we're seeing issues that are coming down before they become problems that we need to fix, causing a whole host of other non-value added activities. So biggest differentiator there is reactive mode versus proactive mode. So our first main step was to go through several workshops with the team. So we collaborated with the frontline leaders themselves to define a leader standard work template or ideal day, you may have heard it called, which when executed properly would bring us to hit our targets. And we had then set a quite ambitious but achievable target of allocating half of our frontline leaders' day to active supervision. So of course we needed to rebalance a few things. Where do those percentage points come from? Right away, we knew we wanted to convert some passive supervision into active supervision. So we were looking at what are those fires that the supervisors are constantly putting out? What are those things that they're reacting to? And how can we proactively address them in a structured way? And then also looking at the administration side of things. So how could we streamline, optimize their reporting so that they could spend less time filling out reports, or duplicate work, as Craig mentioned, and more time managing the floor. So Craig, once we had our leader standard work or ideal day templates put together, what would you say was the most difficult part of this initial change?
Well, I think creating buy-in anytime is important in good change management, and especially with a big culture and ways of working change like this. It needs to be supported at the highest levels, at the medium levels. You have to create buy-in, explain the why behind the what, explain how we're going to free up time in their day to do this, because the first response you're going to get is, look how busy I am. I don't have time to do this additional task that you're asking. But it's about creating a buzz around the activity, creating the key metrics, having kickoff events, making it special, communicating that it's long lasting. And one of the ways that you really can make it sticky is tying it to performance. Now, we weren't ready to go all the way to make it a pay per piece type of activity, which some other companies have done, a true pay for performance model. We did a hybrid model where we tied their coaching performance directly to their end of year review and essentially their salary increases, right? So we said, okay, 50% of your end of year review is going to be based upon how you do in this program. And, when you tie things to money, people oftentimes, their ears perk up and they pay a lot more attention. But it wasn't all about the money. We explained why it was going to be great for the business. We had a bunch of silos of maintenance, sanitation, quality, production working separately. We said, hey, this program is going to help tie together all of the different facets of the organization and make it easier for you to work upon. I'm sure we had some fast followers that believed us right away, and other people needed to see the proof in the pudding, right? So we decided to start with production, which was our main goal, and then layer in the support groups after that, because we felt like there was going to be more resistance in the support groups than production. Production's typically a little bit more capable and ready to implement new things. They have to implement new SKUs all the time, changeovers, things like that. So we focused on that group, and then we brought the other groups along for the ride.
So this was really component number one, or success number one, was to make sure we could, with them, rearrange their day, rearrange their time management so they had the time and capacity, essentially providing them with the time and space to work on their active supervision and connect more closely with their teams. And we even began, as Craig mentioned, to measure their adherence to that leader standard work. And that became our first metric of success, to quantifiably measure how well we were performing. So we called that ASI, Active Supervision Index, which was a reading for us of the sheer quantity of time that our frontline leaders were spending in that value-added mode, in that proactive mode, engaging with their team. So this really gave us the why and the how of things, but we still needed to answer the what. So what does active supervision look like? How does the leader use this time to proactively manage their team's performance? It sounds good. It's hard to do. It's a long list of things to do as a frontline leader. As Chris mentioned, I believe they have one of the most difficult jobs in the organization. It wasn't just a saying. I truly believe it. Their to-do list is a long list. They have to ensure their team, which could be between 20 and 30 people, they need to ensure the safety of their team, the quality of the product they're making, the productivity of their team, the employee morale and engagement of their team, and on-time delivery of what they need to produce. It's a huge list. So from there, our next metric was born. We defined our next metric as MEI, Management Effectiveness Index. In defining with the team what all of the control points of performance were, we were able to set a benchmark of what active supervision at Nellson looked like. So in the middle of the screen here, what you're seeing are the basic categories that we said if a frontline leader is achieving or engaging in these activities, they will be proactively eliminating the variances in their day-to-day operation that prevent that when they occur, create losses or non-value add in the organization. So the bottom four blocks were things that we typically see already in place in organizations. Our frontline leaders, they knew how to assign tasks. They had some basic controls in place, some quality controls. Perhaps there were even some floor tours, Gemba walks, managing the schedule. But what we saw was those top blocks were typically reserved for special teams in the organization and or managers or senior managers engaging in continuous improvement activities, proactive management, identifying and problem solving the variances throughout the day. As we measured the frontline leaders' ability to do these things with more effectiveness, and again, we had given them the time to learn how to do these things, that 50% active supervision went towards their development of these activities. And as they engaged more and more in these activities, we were able to start reducing the variances and bringing the operational performance on a daily basis closer and closer to the potential of the organization. Craig, any key points on that one?
I think that, once again, going back to what you measure is what you accomplish, right? So setting up your measurements to be key levers in your organization, right? So selecting of the proper measurements is critical. For us, like I said, it was throughput primarily, and secondary was yield. We were great at reporting out the next day how we did the day before, but real time, every hour, does the lead or supervisor have the tools, know-how, and structure to troubleshoot and act on problems at that moment so that it doesn't show up poorly on the next day's report? I think that was one of our big disconnects in our organization, showing them this is how often you have to check on things. This is what you do when things are out of control. This is how you touch in with operators. This is how you give them goals, you give them objectives, and then you follow up, right? So that's a key portion of the success of this program is structuring follow-up, structuring communications so that everything that you've determined drives your business gets addressed. It's essentially a playbook for success, not only on how to talk to people, but how to do reports, how to do them effectively, what to look for. We have a very complicated operation, so there's not just one thing that we can focus on. It might be 10 or 20 things that they have to dive into on every active supervision tour, from all the way of the front of the line, all the way through packaging. The metrics, the performance indicators, the support that they need are different. So writing that down and making a very structured approach for them helped them know what was expected of them and how to be successful in their role.
That's right. So as we achieved greater and greater quality and adherence to the standards that we had defined as a group for ourselves, we understood that the variances in the day-to-day operation were being resolved quicker, and in some cases being avoided altogether. So with these two quantifiable metrics, as we define them, we now had a mechanism in place to begin moving the numbers. So defining good and getting good are two different things. For anybody on the call who has ever tried to implement anything whatsoever, you all know how difficult the change process can be if it's not supported properly. So we did want to take a a chance. We wanted to invest our time and energy into following up the workshops and the training we had done with one-on-one coaching to ensure each leader was specifically equipped with the means to succeed in their own individual realities. So we had defined success. We had given them a roadmap of success. But we all know the reality for each individual person out on the floor is different. And that's where coaching really came into play. So it wasn't just Proaction doing the coaching. We also enlisted a team from Nellson to support the coaching efforts. And Craig, maybe you could talk just a bit about what that journey entailed for the Nellson team.
I think coaching for us, there were several key aspects. Analyzing and selecting the right coaches, number one. So to kick off your project is much different than maybe once you're in sustaining. We wanted people that were bought in, had the skill, the will, the thrill to be a coach, wanted to make a difference in the operation. So we all have those people in our operation, either informal leaders or formal leaders that just have the charisma, the pizzazz to be able to bring people together and give them true, honest feedback in a constructive way, but also in a way that helps build people up. It is a skill that can be trained for, but in the beginning of your journey, you want to self-select some people that have some natural ability too, just to get you started off on the right foot. So we selected a group of coaches. It was volunteer only, right? Not voluntold, right? Because I wanted them to be fully invested in the project. And did I have to do some selling on that? Absolutely. People want to ask questions, what's in it for me? Why is it important? What does it mean? How much extra work is it going to be? So all of those questions need to be answered, but selecting those first initial coaches is critical because that is the start of your sustainability journey, which we will get into even more so. But without coaches trained in the process, then you're only relying on the consultants, which is unsustainable, right? And people see it as an external engagement versus an internal engagement. You need to quickly turn it into, this is our process, this is our initiative, this is something that we're driving. Yes, we have these people helping us out, but look, we have these internal coaches that are driving the performance too. And then the second piece is they don't know your business. You know your business, right? We knew our business. Getting those coaches involved helps develop your active supervision rituals, helps develop exactly what goes into what you're going to analyze, and the project takes on, momentum of its own. The coaches start to gradually take more and more over. So you want to select people that have that continuous improvement mindset and can make changes to the program initially to make it best for you, not for someone else. What do you think, Jake? Did I hit the major points there?
I think you nailed it. It's essentially, it comes down to sustainability, as you mentioned, Craig. And these are the things that we put in place so that the benefits coming out of this, you guys could continue to enjoy for the time that comes. So we created that lasting transformation, continues, as Craig mentioned, to have an impact today, and we'll show that in a minute. We knew that our leaders, bottom line, they were most likely to sustain the activity which they saw the value in, enjoyed, and brought them success.
Hey, Jake. Sorry. Go ahead. We have a couple of questions on the Q&A tab.
Let's dig in.
Yeah, I mean, let's dig into a couple of these.
So I can probably field the first one from Martin. I don't have an exact percentage for you, Martin, in terms of, and maybe I'll just restate the question for everybody's benefit. So Martin asked, what is the percentage of the 16,500 analyzed managers that were from the restaurant industry specifically? So I don't have a percentage for you, Martin. I could get a percentage for you. Although I would say of that 16,500 managers, it would be a pretty small percentage from the restaurant industry specifically. The majority of these managers are from backgrounds in manufacturing, food and beverage production, and some heavy industry as well. So it would be a small percentage, but I can of course get you that number. And then Juan has asked us a question. So what application did we have available to track their improvements? So at this point, we were tracking two main things, right? We were tracking ASI, which is how much of their time they were allocating to active supervision, and MEI, which is the quality of that time spent. So both quantifiable metrics, which give us a KBI, a key behavioral indicator. So what we had decided to use with Nellson was the UTrack application, which enables us to understand to what extent our leader standard work is getting executed, by who and where, and the degree of quality when those leaders are engaging in active supervision. So in other words, because we had taken the approach that we wanted to provide continuous coaching to our frontline leaders, whenever those coaches were present with a frontline leader, they would be able to, in essence, score them against the ideal standard. And that's what made up our MEI. That's the data that goes into UTrack that Craig is then able to interpret with his team and understand what areas are really succeeding, really moving fast. What areas do we need to put more attention on? As you'll see in the next slide, what we found out pretty quickly is behavior drove results. So we wanted to therefore manage our behavior, focus on our behavior, and make sure those metrics are moving in the right direction.
If I can expand on a few of those, Jake, the application is wonderful for the data collection. It's a simple web-based program, so you can sit down at your computer and enter your coaching results. Or if you have, the expense budget to get some iPads, you can do the coaching real time on the iPad, where you're scoring the individual, you're documenting their coaching, and it's a nice historical account of the coaching, what was coached upon, what the person needs to improve upon, what are their strengths, that sort of thing, so that their manager can review that data with them. Or, we put in a process where the next time you do a coaching with that individual, one of the aspects is to review the score from the last time, so that you can start to develop trends and see if the individual is improving on, say, talking to employees, or addressing, yield on the line, or, communication with maintenance, changeover time, things like that. So how is that person progressing in their leadership development? And then second, so that's a little bit more about the application. And then Martin had a follow-up question about the percent. And I think, Martin, if I may paraphrase, I think you're trying to get a sense of if this type of initiative would work in a restaurant setting, maybe to train your managers, your front house, your back of house on how to run a restaurant. And I believe, I've never run a restaurant. Won't say that I have, but you're producing a product for a consumer, and you have a bunch of vegetable chopping and preparation and people staffing. So you have a process in order to open your restaurant and run it effectively throughout the shift. It's not that much different than food manufacturing. We have staffing, we have key performance indicators, we have to prepare, we have to execute. So along those lines, you could develop your behavioral indicators to be the things that you wanted to address. How is the manager talking to the cook? How is he giving directions? How is he following up on preparation? So hopefully that helps expand upon what I think you're getting at in terms of the restaurant industry.
It's a great point, Craig. Took the words out of my mouth. So Continuous coaching and feedback is what ensured that our leaders were able to achieve all of this, and in essence, successfully move through that change process. The last question, which I'm sure is the one burning on everybody's mind right now, did it work? After all this investment and time and energy and yes, dollars as well, did it work? Did it pay off for us? Well, we had a measurement in behavior, which we called our KBI, our key behavioral indicator. And we had a measurement in performance, which we all know as KPI. And in this case, it was bars per labor hour, measuring Craig's throughput at his facility. The best way for us to tell if it was working or not, bottom line, was to correlate these two very quantifiable metrics and understand the causality. The results were nothing short of impressive. So this is the real live data from our journey with Craig's plant. As I mentioned, we use two key metrics in our comparison. So MEI, which was the quality of our active supervision. You're seeing that in the dark blue line. And we correlated that with Craig's KPI, which was bars per direct labor hour. We saw throughout the course of implementation, and this is a snapshot of the implementation, an 87% correlation between these two metrics. So I'm not a statistician, but I know that's a strong correlation. It gave us great confidence that where we had chosen to invest our time, energy, and money was paying dividends in a big way. And to be specific on what those dividends were, we were seeing ROIs in that first year of 5.4 times. Now, the implementation of this initiative only lasted over, I think, 6 months, was it, Craig? By the time we got everything up and running. So that 5.4 times was the extension of another 6 months past implementation. And if we look at where that stands today, 67 weeks post-project, we're up at 6.6 times. So the investment, again, is continuing to drive and deliver dividends for us. But perhaps more importantly, the value of this change far exceeded just the financial impact. So, Craig, I'd like to open it up to you for what did it do for your team, for your leadership, for everything outside of the obvious?
I think first and foremost, one of the big, I'd say, factors that isn't easy to quantify is the belief of the employee that you're truly investing in them. It's easy to say as leaders that we value training, we value development, we value internal promotion. But when employees can see that you're investing a large sum of money in their own personal growth to develop them, get them to be, true line supervisors with, long tenure, better pay, all of those things, which we committed to. We said, if we can get our throughput metrics up with just one supervisor per line, then, we can offer to pay that person better. We used to run all of our lines with 2 supervisors, but right before this initiative, we said, we had 10 crews at the time. We want to get all 10 crews with the right people. So I stress timing of your implementation as well. Prior to this, you can see the dates on here when we started was mid-pandemic. So we had a lot of external factors going on, as I'm sure you all did for the last year and a half as well. We didn't start it 6 months prior because I felt the team wasn't ready yet. We weren't stable. We had to at least get the right people placed in the positions, get a little bit stable so that we could maximize our value. That didn't mean we needed all-stars and we needed to revamp everyone. No, we just needed our structure set up correctly, people we thought had potential to get the most out of this initiative, get them in place, and then we kicked it off. But you can see there's a little dip there. So we had an initial surge of when we rolled it out, we saw big gains right away. And then, people reach, that tired phase, oftentimes you have external influences that may affect your performance and draw people's attention away from projects. You may have a big new launch, which was the case in this situation, huge new launch of a new customer. So all of a sudden, our focus got taken away from the project, and we had to bring people back in and refocus the folks after that was completed to continue our journey. And you can see that, we flatline for a little bit, and then we start creeping up. Those last few percentage points of your goal are always the hardest to get, right? If you set your goal aggressively. So we're very happy. We've reached the sustainability process where now it's just what we do. It's active supervision, and our AST form is how we train new leads and supervisors on what their job is. This is the job now. So it's a permanent culture change for us now, but it wasn't easy, and it wasn't overnight. It took 6 months of help, and then it took continued leadership focus from my senior staff, and having great champions, great coaches, keeping them engaged, switching them out, getting new people involved, because being an excellent coach is in addition to your normal everyday duties, and folks need a break on that, and other folks deserve a chance to be a coach. So we've done over the course of 2021, what is it, a year and a half now, we've had the opportunity to mix in new coaches, get fresh blood in there, take some folks out, give them a break. Some of them even come back because they miss it. So it's been a fun journey.
And as we said, Craig, the journey was as important as the result, if not more so. I mean, that was a pillar behind sustainability that we needed to enjoy it so that we would keep doing it.
And if I could add one more thing, I think this was mid-pandemic, and we had a lot of supply chain challenges, lack of ingredients, suppliers not performing, turnover, things like that. A program like this, you could say, oh, wow, that was a big risk to take on during that time. However, I like to think that without this investment, we would have been much more chaotic, much more unstable. At least we were able to stabilize the production leadership and the production performance amid all this other chaos going on. So we had that kind of block to rely on. And while we were investing in them, our turnover at that lead and supervisor was extremely low. So they were able to deal with many operators leaving for higher pay or jobs closer to home, and those external challenges. Oh my gosh, we don't have ingredients and our changeovers in 4 hours. Okay, what do? We have a playbook. We know how to react, adjust, and still perform. So critical for our success during that very challenging time frame.
That's fantastic. So I'm gonna go back to this slide because again, I think it sums up a lot of the key points that and the culmination of the effort that Craig and our team went through. We can open it up to a Q&A at this point. What we did do is we put together just for the audience. Here's a couple of the common questions we usually get when Craig and I are speaking to our networks about what happened at Nellson, Ontario, and some of the common ones. So I'll leave this up for a minute. The audience can take a look, see if any of these questions are ones they would like to pick on or ask. If not, feel free to color outside the boxes as well and ask us other questions in the Q&A poll. We'll give everyone a minute or two, but we'll start answering questions as they start rolling in. Thank you.
Any questions from the team out there, or any of these spark your interest? I know Jake and I talked about a tough one on this list. How do you know you'll get your ROI? And I said to Jake in our practice session, well, nothing in life is guaranteed. And he reminded me that in the contract there was actually a guarantee. So I guess I was wrong about that. But no, I think in all seriousness, if you benchmark correctly, I talked about benchmarking against, in our case, other sites. In the restaurant case, if you have well-performing restaurants, which I'm sure you do, versus other underperforming restaurants, you can see what the financial difference is between your two operations and estimate, if I could just match what I'm doing internally, or if I could match what that competitor is doing that I've benchmarked, how much value would that create in your organization? And that's what we did. We had a couple of outstanding performing facilities, of which my facility was not one, but we knew we had the capital, we had the right people to get there. We just needed the guidance, right? So we needed the tools given to the people to enable them to utilize the assets, and we knew if we did that, we could perform at that level. So we were pretty confident that we would have a good ROI.
And it looks like we've got a question from Marav. Thanks, Marav, for asking that question. I think it's a fantastic one. I'll repeat it for the group. Do you think you need a background in development training, or is it more important to have operations experience, or maybe a combination of both, in order to effectively implement what we did? I know I have an answer, but Craig, I'm going to let you take a stab at that one first, because it was really a combination of your folks who got involved.
Yeah, I think to answer literally, it's great to have a combination. I think it's somewhat, I view it as the consultant's role, if they're going to be there 6 months, to develop that internal skill for you and help you along the way. That's part of the coach's development process. We had a few people. We had one specifically that had a training background. In fact, we hired him as our training coordinator. So he naturally gravitated towards the project, and he was our first coach. So ideally, you have at least one person in your organization that has either that skill set, background, or official position would even be great, like in our case. I think you have to have leadership that understands the importance of all of those things that you mentioned. The leadership that understands the cost of turnover and the cost of retraining people. If not, it's likely that you'll have to do some internal education and maybe even pull some data to understand how much is not having great leadership costing you, even if you have to put some estimates together. So I don't think it's a requirement. It certainly helps if you have that experience, but a lot of the basics are about it. Like I said, it's a playbook for success, right? So how do you talk to somebody? How do you give them objective? How do you follow up in a good professional manner? Many of our frontline leaders don't have that training, but you can coach and develop it in them.
And I think that almost ties in, Craig, to the next question that was asked by Javid. So explaining a little bit about the resistance to change in people. And so, well, to your point, operational skill set versus training or HR background. As Craig mentioned, you need a balanced approach. You need some of both, and you certainly cannot overlook the change management aspect of what you're doing. You're rearranging people's day. You're rearranging how they operate and what they look at, and it's a huge change. So there's a couple of tools, and they're not exclusively the only ones out there. They're the ones we found effective when working with Nellson and many of the other teams. The emotional curve being one of them, understanding that as soon as we ask or task anybody to change the way they're operating or doing things, the emotional curve, it's up, down, up. So they're going to get excited. They're going to be all for it. And then as soon as we start to move from mechanical, understanding the what, to compliance and making sure we're doing it every day, that's when things get tough. And as Craig mentioned, there's external influences that come in, and it almost creates oh my gosh, I have to do this every single day. I have to do my active supervision every single day. What if we have a new launch? What if we have a new SKU coming through? Then what? So managing that process in a sustainable way, understanding that there's always going to be excitement. There's always going to be frustration at a certain point and or negotiation. Maybe I'll do it sometimes and not others. But we need to use coaching, and we need to dedicate the right amount of time and energy into moving our team through that change process. Because if they get stuck in that frustration period, that's when you get resistance to change. That's when it really starts to slow the momentum of your change process. And I'd say through that, there's a lot of other tools you can use if you're experiencing resistance to change, to identify what's going on at the individual level. The SCARF model is a great one. Just understanding the why and communication is another great one. And as Craig alluded to, having all of the right people involved and letting your frontline leaders know how important this is to the organization is a huge one. I'd say that is one of the larger reasons why we had the success that we did at Nellson, because everybody from the top down was intimately involved in making sure this was successful. And the frontline leaders saw that. They saw Craig getting involved in a daily basis. They even saw the CEO of Nellson getting involved in the steering team calls and the discussion as well. So it was very clear it was an all hands on deck effort. And therefore, we had sent that message very clearly to the frontline leaders. This is important, and we have your back. We support you. Good question,
Jack. I wanted to jump in here since the Q&A seems to be drying up a little bit, but I did have a question that I wanted to talk about a little bit, and it is connected, I think, to the resistance to change, but that would be the time commitments part. And I know you talked about this a little bit, Craig, but I'm wondering, maybe some best practices on getting buy-in for that. I would assume that eventually this makes things a little bit leaner, more efficient, but at the front, you do have more of a time input as you're kind of taking a look at these new programs. So like I said, I know you spoke to it a little bit, but maybe any best practices for getting employee buy-in on that part specifically?
Well, I mean, I think that directly relates to Jake's discussion right there on change management as well, explaining the why behind the what, explaining that if we're doing less firefighting, then we all have more time in our day. And this type of program should proactively address issues on the line where then you don't have to do a presentation and explain yourself the next day on why you had low throughput, why you had yield. So, if you have a good culture of accountability and you have to explain low performance, then, hopefully people will buy into this tool is going to help you perform better. And then you're going to have much easier conversations with your boss or leader on your performance. And then, of course, I'm a firm believer in you get what you measure, right? So changing up all of your metrics to show the results of this program so that it refocuses people's mind and energy on the program. If you continue to measure lots of other things, but not the performance of your project. For us, we called it High Jump because we wanted to raise the bar. So we came up with a cool name to create buzz. High Jump was, and it's still referred to as Project High Jump. We have a High Jump weekly review meeting. So you have to build in your structure to support your goals, right? So I created a specific management review every single week where we went over management performance. Every manager had to present out on their individual leaders. So you're creating organizational accountability throughout the organization in order to drive the results that you want to see. If you don't support the initiative with metrics, with either bonus or money or something like that, then it's going to hurt your sustainability, and it's going to be, the flavor of the month kind of thing. I think Christina asked about sustainability and how do you sustain past engagement. It's all of those things that I just talked to, tying it to people's performance, making it a part of your every week routine. It has to become part of your DNA. Every once in a while, myself or the other directors will do a spot check of a coach, an interaction, an AST. We have every 6 months, we have a graduation event for new people, right? So at the end of our initiative, we gave everyone nice certificates and we said, congratulations. And they were all proud. We had a big ceremony. And then we try to do that every 6 months for the new people and give some awards. So to try and keep it fresh and keep the folks engaged.
Yeah, and Jacob, I'll let you kind of have the closing moment here since we only have a couple minutes left. Anything else you want to add to that great answer that Craig just put up there?
Oh man, that's a tough act to follow, Chris. I'm not sure, but perhaps just to summarize a couple of the key points. There's of course a lot of detail behind this, but essentially it's create an environment and a structure where your team has the framework and the time and capacity to work on their active supervision. Clearly define with them what their active supervision is. And most importantly, give them the support and the coaching in order to successfully implement that and sustain it. That is typically where these change management processes fall short, is we train, we show the how-to, and then we just expect that it gets done, and then we wonder why it doesn't. So adding in that coaching piece and probably more of it than you think, is going to ensure you successfully move through that change process and deliver success for your frontline leaders.
And that's an excellent way to end the session, I think. So I want to take the moment here, excuse me, to thank Jacob and Craig today for joining us today. I'd like to thank Proaction International for sponsoring this webinar and also Nellson for participating in the event. Just make sure you keep an eye on your inbox for a recording of this webinar in the coming days. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Jacob and Craig.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure.